Hi everyone. Today I'm going to talk about a topic briefly it's a topic that keeps coming up constantly, and I know why. I'm going to make a statement, and then I want you to think about how you feel when I say this. Trauma doesn't cause addiction. Now, if you haven't had trauma, you might say, oh, okay, I think it does, but yeah, maybe that's true. But if you've had trauma and you've had an addiction, I guarantee you that that statement sounds dismissive, rude, unthinking, and untrue. And we get pushback on the statement, and people will dismiss the freedom model because we make the statement that trauma doesn't cause addiction. But it's important, we're not saying, and this is important, we're not saying that trauma doesn't play a role in some people's addiction. What we're saying is that trauma doesn't cause it. And the operative word that we need to concentrate on here is cause. When something is cause and effect, there's no way to avoid the cause and effect process. So if you were to walk up behind somebody and clap your hands, they will blink. You are caused to blink. You have no choice in the matter. In the book, we use the example of if you light a match, place it over the fumes of gasoline, 100% of the time it will light on fire. Cause and effect. It's the match causes the fire, right? The fumes. So this idea that trauma causes you to behave in a certain way is untrue, and the research shows that. Now, trauma may be a reason for you to have a substance use problem. It may be a catalyst where you decide every time you think about this traumatic event in your life that you decide to use. So we don't deny that trauma can play a role in some people's heavy use or use. We've never said that it doesn't play a role in some people. But we, as researchers, we had to look at if it was causal. If it caused people to use, then anybody who was exposed to substances in their sphere of influence who had trauma would use. Right? But they don't. Statistically, they don't. Most people that have trauma, and that's most of the population in the world, don't have a heavy substance use problem. So it can't be causal. Right? So let's say that you grew up in a family, to give an example, let's say you grew up in a family that was had a tremendous amount of chaos and trauma in it. Molestation, rape, beatings, all kinds of abuse, real trauma. I know something about that. You know, I grew up in a pretty harsh environment. And then you have a parent, or maybe both parents, who drink and drug, so you've learned that drinking and drugging are the norm. So that's your drinking or drugging norm in your family. So you've learned that. And you have 4 siblings. Let's say you're the 5th kid. And half of them don't use, even though they're exposed to the very same traumas and the very same drinking norms that exist in that environment. Statistically speaking, 2 or 3 wouldn't have a problem. Now, there are some families where they have the problem throughout, but statistically speaking, most people that have these traumas will not get high and drunk. Problematically, they won't. So, as a researcher, you can't throw out that population, because the only way to say it's causal is if you throw out anybody in the demographic that basically doesn't drink and drug, even though they have trauma in their lives. So what we're saying is there's something else at play here. And that something else is that some people frame their addiction around their traumas. They might hold the belief that the memories of the trauma are clouded out by heavy use. And if they hold that belief, it would make sense. It would make sense. That's their reason, though. They're using their own reasoning. That it's not causal. They're not caused to use. There's not some outside force, the trauma, forcing use. That's the only point. But this nuance is important because on the one hand, if you say people are caused to use because of trauma, if you believe that, if that's the belief, then there's no way out. If they have trauma, there's no way out. They're a minion of their trauma. Now, here's an interesting thing also. The idea that we need to investigate trauma and rehash it over and over in therapy also has been proven to be harmful. Now, I'm not saying that people shouldn't talk about their traumas and get over them, but I am saying that rehashing it multiples of times is usually not the best approach to taking care of the trauma. In other words, sometimes the best way is to address it and move on. I had to move on and let it go and just look forward and say that's not my life anymore, and there's nothing I can do about what happened to me. And I did. I moved on completely. Sometimes that's hard to do. It took me years to really figure that out and move on with my life. So we're not being dismissive to people's traumas. Every one of the authors had their own version of it. And it wasn't pretty. All of us felt hopelessly addicted. And I certainly connected my troubles from the past to my use. But when I learned the research, I was able to let it go, disconnect the trauma from my use, address each one as a singular problem, and it became very easy to problem solve. So that's what the freedom model does. So we're not downplaying the effects of trauma. What we're doing is we're accurately portraying what is reality, and that is that you can have full control over your life, full control over how you view your traumas, full control over your drinking and drugging problem, and move on from both. And there's a way to do that. But if you feel as if you are caused to use and it's beyond your control, that's mythology, but it becomes your truth if you believe it. And that's dangerous territory because there's no way out. There's no way to fix that if it's a force beyond your control. And isn't it a better situation to know that you can move on from these things? That they're not causal, that there's reasoning behind it. You have reasons for use. You have created reasons to connect your trauma to your use. And that's understandable. And but the good news is if you can use those same reasoning powers to disconnect it and move on from both. That's so important. It's so vital. You can be free from your past. I'm sorry about the bumpy road. I'm sure the video's going all over the place here. So yeah, it's a very empowering message. So yes, trauma doesn't cause substance use or addiction, but it can be a reason for it. And reasons can change, be adapted, they can change. Your point of view, your perspective, and how you deal with things can change. Because addiction doesn't happen to you, it's something we engage in and create. So, I hope that clarifies the issue. And, yeah, I hope it was helpful. Take care. Have a good day.